Well, first of all, welcome to PHSNE's presentation tonight. This is a real honor for me as the new president of PHSNE to be able to introduce speakers at this forum. And I'm very excited, probably more so than most of the presentations, because I have a real interest in what Terry's going to be talking about tonight, as does PHSNE. It's a part of our mission. I think one of the more important parts of our mission, to preserve images for generations and generations to come. So I'm very excited to hear her talk tonight. Also, I just want to maybe throw out something. You know, we're always looking for volunteers. PHSNE works, I think, pretty well, and it's all because of the volunteers that we have. And so if you're interested in volunteering on any of the things that we do, please send me an email at president@phsne.org. And I would certainly appreciate your help. If you have any editorial skills, writing skills, proofreading skills, that would be especially appreciated. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana. And Dana, if you can introduce our speaker.
Thanks, John. Hi, I'm Dana G. I'm the program coordinator for PHSNE. Tonight, before we get started, I just have a few other announcements, and I'll introduce Terry in just a moment. So the active screen you probably saw when you joined is being recorded for YouTube. That will be posted later. We'll have a link up on our YouTube channel. If you haven't been using Zoom recently, or if you're new to it, at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat. We'd like you to please type your questions for Terry into the chat as we go along. And the default addressee is everyone, and that would be great so we can all see your questions. If you have any technical difficulties, you can type in there as well, and we'll try and address them. Please stay muted during the presentation. And if you have a question that pertains to what Terry's talking about at the moment, I'll try and interject for you and read the question. But please stay on mute. And then we'll do the rest of the questions at the end. The top right of your screen is the view selection. I would recommend speaker view for the presentation and gallery view for the end, so we can all see each other. Okay, so our speaker tonight is Terri Cappucci. Terri holds a BA in photojournalism and an MFA in photography from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. As a photojournalist, she took freelance photos for the Boston Globe magazine, and the New York Times for more than 15 years. She then launched a 20-year project from 1994 to 2014, a photographic study of the social and political changes in the South African province of Kwa Zulu Natal. She had a well-received exhibit, South Africa in Black and White, at the Massachusetts State House in Boston, and she'll tell you more about that project. She received specialized training regarding historical photographic processes and preservation from the George Eastman Museum and the Northeast Document Conservation Center, and she has worked on the preservation, digitization, restoration, and archiving of photographic collections. And Terry, it's all yours.
Excellent. So I want to say thank you to PHSNE and to Ben, John, and Dana for setting this up this evening. And it's nice to see everybody out there. And I love speaking to groups where people are really interested in photography. So when I see this many faces, I know that we've got a group of people that are going to enjoy some of the historical things coming through tonight. So I want to give you a brief introduction, go into a little more depth than what Dana just did. I did freelance as a photojournalist. That's how I started out. I worked for a newspaper for several years, and then I went on to freelance with the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and the Boston Globe magazine was one of my favorites, which I did quite a bit of for a while. From there, I went on and received my MFA in photography, and started teaching, and then I really started getting interested in alternative processes. And as I learned about alternative processes, of course, you start learning about the history of those processes, and a lot of the earlier, the more traditional styles of photography and the equipment and the processes. It was all just fascinating to me. So I started to learn and really dive into that area for my own personal work. I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation tonight, and I'm going to stop at some point during it, and I'm going to have to take you to YouTube quickly, and then I have to go back to the presentation because there was just a little technical glitch going on that I didn't want to pass on to everybody. So if you can just bear with me, I'm about to start that. Let's see. Okay, you can all see that, right? Okay, great. So I'm going to just briefly touch on the alternative processes that I've been working with, you know, things that I've been doing over the years. And there's a couple of them in there that I can't really do anymore very often, and you'll see why in a few minutes, and then I'll move on to something else. So the first one, this is one that's really tough for me because there's not a lot of film left. This was, I used to enjoy doing the Polaroid emulsion lifts. This is with the 6.9 films or 6.69. I guess they call it the 9s. Polaroid made a really beautiful film that you could remove the emulsion on, and I really enjoyed the process. You'd warm up the emulsion, and then you would have to slide it off of you know, its background onto a new substrate. And this for me was you know, watercolor paper. That's where I actually first started doing that. And I played around with that until, actually I still have some boxes of it. I do still play around with it, but unfortunately, I think it was around 2009 maybe when they stopped making it, and it was heartbreaking. I know that there were, like, Fuji tried to replicate some of their other films, but they never fixed that peel apart one. They were never able to get that same emulsion. So I can't do that anymore except with what I have left over. But this was a fun one I used to enjoy. This one here is called a Chiclet film transfer. And what it is I can use my digital printer to print my work on, and then I print it on a piece of film. It's like a clear, it's clear film. So I print on that, and then I distress some of the print, and then I transfer that onto watercolor paper too. And, you know, I'm pretty particular. I choose certain watercolor papers for certain processes. And for this one here, I really like a nice hot press because it's nice and smooth. And I use that quite often for this process. And this is something that a lot of people can do from home too. And I've taught workshops on this, and if anybody's interested, you're welcome to reach out to me and I can talk about that. I've also been doing cyanotypes. I had this actually I made for this show or for the presentation because it's one of the glass plate images from the collection that I'm going to be sharing later. But it was fun to put this together, you know, and the clarity of these glass plates is amazing, but it's also fun to use in another process. I do wet plate collodion. This is one I did in Birmingham, Alabama. I really enjoy doing this. It's a smelly process for anyone who's ever done it, and you don't want to breathe it in too much. You might find yourself fading off to sleep if you get too much of that inhaled. But it is one of my favorite processes. This one here is called gum oil. This process is also done on watercolor paper, and I use different because I can use different pigments, but I tend to work mostly in like a lamp black, and I use oil paint for this process after the image is exposed and then developed. You can't really see much of the image until you put the oil paint on, and then you'll start seeing the shadows come through. And there are videos on my website. There's a video page, and you can see actually some of these processes, how I do them. So you're welcome to check the links out that I also put on in the chat at the beginning. so that you can have more a more in-depth look. This is the bromoil process, which is really getting hard to do. This is and the reason it's getting hard is because it's hard to get the paper for this process. And you go through, you just print this under an enlarger like you would, any other image. And then you go through a bleaching process after the photo is, exposed, or after the photo is done. You then take it back to another process where you bleach it, the image disappears, and then you use graphic ink, and you just blot it all over multiple times, and and then there's a rinsing process and going back and doing it again. And it's something I really enjoy doing as well. I like that tactile feeling. I love digital photography, but there's just something about having a photograph come to life right in front of you that I can't get away from that. And so I'm always willing to try anything where I can make it happen using, any handmade processes. So now I'm going to talk to you about my South Africa project. This was a documentary that I did. I started in 1994, and I did show this at the State House in Boston. I also showed this, I think it was for my MFA project when I was finishing my graduate degree, and that was almost at the half point of the project. I continued it for another 10 years past that. It was most of these images that I consider part of what a part of my collection. These images here are all in black and white. I will explain what happened with the project towards the end here, but I'm just going to show you some of these images. This is my lifelong project. And I've probably made 24 trips to South Africa. At the time, I used to take my son with me, and I would have him carrying my bags. He really enjoyed that when he could get out of school and go on these trips. It was very educational for him, obviously. This photograph here is during the South Africa, their all-race elections in 1994, where people were standing in those long lines waiting to vote for the first time. And I won't spend a lot of time on this project, and you'll see why towards the end. This is a blind man voting for the first time. This machine is actually, they used to put, when they went through this process, they put something on your hand so that when you put it in the light and it lit up, it would show that you probably voted once before. And I guess it's the same stuff that they put on to determine whether somebody has touched guns or gunpowder or something. And I'm not really familiar with what it is, but that's what he was doing here. He was being taken over to see that. This is a woman who was waiting in line. This is one of my favorite out of all of the photographs I've taken in South Africa. This is probably the one that means the most to me. It really represents the change that was taking place in South Africa during that time. She had been waiting in line, and these people did wait for 3 days to vote. I was there, I saw it, it was crazy. And somebody bringing water around and offering that up. This was a woman in the street who was just walking during, the afternoon. And I just started documenting people in their environments. This was a young boy in a little township called Gamalaki. And that's his, I was standing in their house photographing out the door. This was a photograph that I was a runner-up for the Gordon Parks Award with years ago. This doesn't, it's interesting because this is one of those photos where a caption is necessary, because you might think, oh gosh, these kids are being kept, behind, razor fences, and that's not what it is. You also see this intensity of this one boy, and then you see this other, these other two boys smiling. What this was this is actually around their playground. And this was for their safety, so that when they were at school, because there was some violence taking place during that time. And this was actually not during the 94 elections. I believe it was during I think it was 96 when they were doing local elections. So I had gone back during another time and I was photographing this. These are two portraits, a woman who was walking for miles with sticks and that's an ice towel on her head. She had ice in there. It's very hot. And I don't know how people can do this. It really amazes me, but they walk for miles with sticks, buckets of water and such on their heads. Now, remember, these were taken back in '94. This gentleman, oh, this was actually, why it says 2003. I think that there's a mistake on that one. But this gentleman, his name was Baba Lili, and he lived in a township called Shobashabani. And if you look that up, you'll see that there was a massacre that took place there on Christmas morning in '95. And he had several wives, and they were all killed during that horrible attack. And I was there to cover the aftermath of that as well. And this is just a family, you know, it's something typical you'll see in Gamalaki. And again, you know, 20 years ago for a lot of these. So these are older photos. And this is how, in 2003, I presented this project as my graduate, my thesis for my MFA, and it was hanging in the gallery. And I just wanted to show you the quality of what that looked like when it was done. And now comes the part that I struggle with, the studio flood. And this is why, this is kind of where it takes me to why I went into preservation. I was one of those people that really felt like with film, I want my work to be film. I don't want it digital. So I didn't digitize it. I insisted that it's like, it is a completely different beast. And it really is when, you know, if you understand photography to the point of, you know, comparing, you know, the look of a print made in a dark room versus a print made digitally, there's a real, you know, I can identify the difference. I mean, it's just very clear to me. And I love the look of prints made from film. And of course, I just didn't want to digitize this project because I thought it would be too easy to just make copies, and the project would just take on a different meaning. And this is where I made the mistake. The mistake was I never really thought ahead about what if something ever happened to the negatives. I thought, you know, I keep them safe. They're always in my studio. I keep them in, you know, I would keep them in their sleeves, sometimes their original sleeves. And I had, you know, the plastic sleeves that said archival on them. And I thought, I'm doing it right. I kept them in, you know, I had a portfolio bag. I had a lot of negatives in there. I had them in little boxes. And, you know, I did what I think most people do. You try to keep them safe and you keep them where you spend most of your time. And I was down here all the time in my studio. And then it happened. I had a contractor came to my home and made a terrible mistake, and it flooded, and I lost most of this project. And so, you know, it took a long time for me to really, I'm going to show you what these looked like. These were some of the slides that were damaged, and I can't zoom in, but there's one there. I think there's a way. Is there a way to make this a pointer? Is that what this is? Yes, a laser pointer. So if you look, can you see the pointer? Is it showing? So if you look closely, like right in this area, you might see some white spots, and that's where some of the damage was done. The washing machine in my basement had a load of laundry in it, and it had, you know, laundry detergent. It had hot water coming through, and it had soap and whatnot. But what happened was I had a contractor come to do some work in the house, and they had unplugged my pipe to the drain hose, and they didn't plug it back in. And so it didn't just pump water out of that tub. It pumped for hours and hours and hours, because I learned about it. It's called the siphoning effect that takes place, and it will just pour. And it was hot water on a dirty, you know, the floor in the basement gets dirty. You can only keep it so clean. So they got dirt, they got everything including the chemicals. And this is some of the aftermath. Now, these are some of the colored negatives. I just picked out some that we're going to show you some details of what happened. This is trying to go through them. This was that exhibit that you saw at the beginning, and the photos were just gone. This is what was left from some of the emulsion. I can see some people, their heads going, it's really, it was a painful experience to see this, and it still is. This happened in 2015. And so that is why when I was presented with the opportunity to take on a project that I could preserve, I was like, it's not my work. I don't want to be involved in anything that's not my work. I want to spend my time doing my stuff, but I couldn't. There was just something really compelling about this glass plate project that was offered to me. So I took it, and, I didn't realize that, there were about 4,000 glass plates in that collection. And now I'm going to go on to the archiving part of this. And this is where I'm going to come off of here. I'm going to attempt to go to the YouTube link and show you what I'm actually doing with the glass plates. And then I'll talk about that a little bit. It's about 1.5 minutes long. Let me see if I can get out of this laser pen for a minute. And now, got to remember how to do this. So are you still seeing my screen?
Terri, I just hit stop screen sharing for you. So now you can hit share screen again and pick the one you'd like with the audio.
Perfect. So I got to share audio. And then I'm going to see, play. So I'm now going to switch back to the PowerPoint. Oops, actually, I don't think I am. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Not yet. Let's try again.
Hold on, let me try that again. Sorry about that. What did I do here? Let's see. Go back to here. Oh, I have to share screen again. That's what I got to do. I knew that I might have some mumbling going on behind the scenes here. Well, I figured this out. Okay, so go back to here, and I think I got it right now. We got it? Perfect. Okay. So this is the condition that a lot of them came in. It was, I didn't know I knew I had worked with, my own ambrotypes, working with glass plate and working with tintype. So I understood, the process and what it was, but I was pretty shocked when I saw how badly they had been stored. And you take a look at, just the ratty edges of the paper here. Let me get that laser again for you. You know, the edges of the paper crumbling, you can just see the age. You can see the age from these old newspapers. I mean, I had newspapers that were in here from like 1900. I was in shock when I looked at them. A lot of these had a lot of dirt and moisture and mold setting in on them. And I haven't gotten through all of these, obviously. It's a very big project. But some of them had writing. I find, you know, there's always, it's been said that when photographs, you know, when no one knows who took them or no one knows anything about them, that there's not a lot of value to them. And I think in some cases that's actually kind of true. But in a case like this, I feel like there is so much history and there's so much to be learned from viewing them because of the time that it was, you know, the era that these were taken in. And as I started going through these, I was just so moved that I had no choice but to have to restore. And, you know, I was really compelled to not let this project disappear. I will say that with my South Africa project, just something I wanted to let you know is that the photos that you did see on the screen, I'm having to do digital work to them now. I'm trying to restore some of them, the best ones, the ones that mean the most to me, and I'm working at that so that I will be able to bring them back, bring some of them back. But it's the same thing here. You can see the emulsion just down in this little area here, peeling off the broken glass. This is what my studio sort of looked like. I have an 8-foot-long table down here, and I had things set up, and I was going through slowly, just kind of trying to figure out what to do. I had no idea how I would even think of organizing something like this. Here's some more images, you know, some showing more of what I was dealing with. I've had a lot of people offering to help me, which has been kind of fun too. This is, you know, an example also. You know, I did have some that came in boxes, which were nice. And it did, you know, somebody obviously had this collection before me because they put them in those white envelopes. So somebody had definitely gone through some of these at some point. So some of the information that I get is what's written on there, and I don't always know that it's true. The only stuff that I really trust is when I find those little brown envelopes with the handwriting on it. And, you know, I trust that more. But this is what I'm doing with them is I clean them like you saw in the video, and I only use the distilled water. I clean the glass side. I don't touch the emulsion except with a little brush that I have here if need be. You really don't want to mess with the back of those because you just don't know, you know, they could peel off so easily, or you could damage them even with a thumbprint. But what I do is I put them all in the 4 flap envelopes, which I don't know how much background most of you have with photography, but I know, you know, in talking with Dana, she said that a lot of people may understand exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, ask questions. I have things here that I can hold up and show you when I'm done. So what I do is I go through and I'm just labeling them. They're glass plates starting at 001, and I'm kind of going through cleaning them, digitizing them, putting them in the 4 flap envelopes, starting a library with them, and then I am putting a contact sheet of what those images are inside each box. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm hoping that it ends up in a museum at some point. I hate to see these just sit, and you know, it's sad to me because historical societies, they're fabulous for so many things, but when it comes to photography, they don't always have, you know, they don't have the money. There's no money for them. So, you know, they have to depend on volunteers to come in and scan, and they don't always know what the resolution is. They don't properly clean them. They just put them back in their envelopes. And then it really went through all that for no reason, because then you really can't use them later. So I have 2 files I create. I create a TIFF file that isn't touched at all. That is the permanent archival file. And then I also make a JPEG file so that if I want to make adjustments and make prints or something, I can work with that. But I always keep that TIFF file from being touched. And out of that was born, somebody photographed this, because I don't know who did it, but somebody photographed this. And I've gotten quite a response from people. Here's one of the images. I'm going to show you the photos I show you. They all have a little, this one here just happens to say it right across it because it was a neat image and I wanted to share it with you. But I have a little watermark on each at the bottom. These were shared on social media, so that's why it's on there. And let's see if I can get to the next one. This was another one that I loved. I really, I was looking at them in a dress, and then I'm looking at the bike, and you can see the screen in there protecting the, probably her legs or her socks or the dress from getting caught in the chain. This one here was interesting. I had so many comments on this. It's like people had to sit for such a long time unless they had some type of a light going off in there, which, I can't imagine. They may have had a big flash going off in there. But, I had people say, is this a photograph of a couple posed? Somebody thought that one of them was deceased and they were trying to figure out. And I said, no, I don't think so. I mean, then they were, I've had so many people talking about these photographs. I had somebody reach out to me and say, but look at the guy, look at him, and it just, all of my photographs that I'm putting on here are getting these strange conversations, but I can understand where people are coming from. Here's another one. Now, people are sending me photographs sending me digital negatives from different parts of the world, and I'm adding them to this project. It's really neat. This one here is from Brazil, and I loved this photograph. I actually know the person that sent me these was one of my students. When I taught, I used to teach it at a photo school, and he saw I was working on this project and sent them up to me. This is another one that I just love this. Now, I grew up in Bernardston, Mass, and I'm a native of the area, and I went to a high school where there were 4 little towns, and this picture on the envelope said that it was from Northfield, Massachusetts, and that's the next town. That was one of the towns where I hung out because the kids all went to my school. And so when I looked at this photo and I started looking at the detail, I'm just fascinated by it. You can see he's holding like an axe or something in his hand, and you look by and you can see the sharpening wheel. I guess that's what that is. It's a stone wheel on the lower part. Let's see, right here, or the red. Oh, what do they call that? A whetstone. I think that's what it is. You've got children's toys here, on the ground. And then over here, somebody thought there might be a little dog house or something in here. But I love this photograph. It's one of my favorites. This one here, I don't have much info on. I'm trying to figure out whether it's football or rugby, and I really don't know because it looks more like a rugby ball to me, but I just don't know because I don't know that era. But I know that a lot of people have enjoyed this photo too, especially sports people. They're like, look at the shoes he was wearing. And I'm trying to figure out if these things on his shins are, for contact, something hard. I like the hockey players wear. So their clothes were definitely different. This is one that a lot of folks like as well. It's the Hoosic Tunnel. This was actually taken. They estimated that this was taken, and the people, when I say they estimated, there's a historical history group for the Hoosic Tunnel, and they were matching it up with their photographs, and they said that they believed that the freight house was moved from one side of the tracks to the other, and that they were estimating this was around 1860. Now, I don't know, but they were showing me other photos where they had posts going up both sides with wires going over the top of it, and they weren't even built yet in this photo. So I'm fascinated by it. This was another one. I was trying to figure out if that was a hat or something else, and it does appear to be a hat from what everybody's saying. These also came from Brazil. These are two of my favorites. This is the baby. I believe this is him a little bit older outside having a bath. And these were about 1900, 1902-ish, I think. Here's another photograph that I shared. This was in Greenfield, Massachusetts, which is the next town over where I live, the Greenfield Marble Works. And I'm assuming that was a bunch of people have looked this up and tried to figure out where it was. And it was on, I think they said Davis Street in Greenfield, and that it may have been the Greenfield Marble Works may have been from the cemetery of the stone people that make, I don't know, people who make cemetery stones. But I don't know, because I've never really seen marble stones back in those days. So I don't know. I really don't. But, it's fun to look up the history with everybody and have so many people involved and fascinated. This is another photo I have no info on. It's just beautiful, though. Oops, sorry about that. Another photograph. Somebody with a bicycle. Love the mustache, love the outfit. And this is where the value comes in again, seeing, what life was like over 100 years ago. I know that we have photographs from the 50s and 60s that are fading out on paper, but we don't have a lot of these images from back in this time. So we have to depend on these glass plates. This was sent to me by a woman who was from England, and she sent this, she lives here in the States and sent this over. And this was a tea, having an afternoon tea. And these are the links that I have on here. And I put them in the chat at the very beginning of the chat that you can also look on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and answer questions. If you have any questions, let's see, stop sharing. There we go. All right.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
That's wonderful. Everyone, if you would like to unmute briefly and give Terri a round of applause before we.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
So we do have some questions.
Sure.
Mute yourselves again, and I'll read these to Terri, and then at the end we can take some live questions. Audrey just wanted to say that the bromoil is exquisite.
Thank you.
Stephen Shore had a note that you should be aware of the APAG, American Photography Archive Group.
Yeah, I'm actually a member.
Okay, excellent. Let's see. He also says there's a long history in including deceased relatives to family groupings or post-mortem photographs of children. I've seen those.
I have a lot of those in here, and I just didn't put them, I haven't gotten to, I've scanned a lot of them. I have a lot of them in the archives, but I just haven't shared them on social media or anything. I don't think that's the place for it. I'm trying to figure out how they would be shared, maybe in a, in an article or a blog or something like that, but not just a post. But yes, I have a large amount of children. It's mostly children that I'm seeing. So
let me see. Drew says, did you mention what camera you used on your trips to South Africa?
Oh, I started out, I have an F5 over there, but when I started out, I was using a Nikon FM2 with I think it was an MD10. MD12 motor drive. And that's what I shot with most of it. I had a Nikon F4 at one point, but the FM2, I had a couple of those, and those were the ones that were with me most of the time. Best camera ever.
Coleb says that gold DVDs and CDs are archival, regular ones are not. I haven't heard that to be, I remember hearing that when I was starting out, but I don't know.
Like I said, I'm not putting a lot of stock and energy into those. I think the main, I should have probably clarified that the main backup is on, hard drives and in the cloud right now, and looking to see where the best place is going to be to permanently get them somewhere and have copies there as well.
Right. I mean, the whole thing with storing data digitally is, what is the technology going to be? And is this lossless? Like the TIFF is the archival,
yes,
form, but, JPEGs are what is most used to share and put online.
Exactly. And that's why I have two copies. I have the working copy. I'll play with that one, but the TIFF file, it's just backed up. It's just, that's the way it is. And you're right. We don't know what's going to happen with technology even 10 years from now. So that's why it's important that when people do back these things up, that they know what the standard practices are, so that it's not going to be something that they have to redo, in 5 years if they want, to back them up.
Jeff says the Library of Congress re-records everything every 6 years. So I'm having trouble scrolling down here. Hang on a second. There we go. Drew asks, have you done anything to protect things for potential future floods?
Oh, yeah. It's called, I will never put anything I will never lean anything that's of value against a wall. I will always have everything up off of the floor. It's my bad. I mean, I didn't want to admit it when it happened. I was so angry, and it wasn't my fault that it happened, but I guess I didn't realize, I just never thought about what would happen if there was a flood. And now that I know, it's really important to me to encourage people to back their work up, to digitize work, even if it's not meant to be digital. It's better to not lose everything, have something rather than nothing.
Yes. Yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn, but you got to think about it. Steve asks, are your TIFF files direct scans or are they inverted to positives?
They are direct.
Okay. And Sid wants to know what scanner you use.
I'm using the Epson V850.
Okay. Let's see. Hang on. Scanner. I'm going backwards for some reason. Bear with me. That's very strange. Copyright issues. How do you address copyright with this collection? Do you have any information on the photographers?
No, I'm sorry.
Or the estate, or
plug my computer in. So it wasn't on, and I am not sure why, but I almost lost it. It's charging now. Copyright, anything before 1920 is, I think it's 1920 is not, you don't have to really worry about that. Anything later than that, and it's hard because I can't tell, some of it you just can't tell. Some of the smaller ones, you look at them and you can tell that they're probably they might be in the 40s or something. And so I do have to be careful with those, but I can at least still back them up and, have them.
Copyright law is complex. And I know that, for print materials, it used to be 1923.
Yeah.
But I have also remember somehow that it was 70 years after the life of the photographer, if the
Right, or
photographer
after their
was
death.
after their death.
I think, right, they die and then another 70 years. So some of these from 1920 or something, or 1925 or 1930, they may already, be out of it, but we don't know for sure. So
Right.
yes, it is very complicated.
It is, and I'm not an expert in copyright law, so but you
learning
can research these
regularly.
things. I think the Library of Congress has a guide to image copyright.
Right.
Or you can find that if you Google it. John says the BPL had a flood a few years ago where a water pipe in the street broke and made a mess of stuff stored in the cellar.
Yeah.
I had a house fire in April and everything was soaked. And so I had one box, a plastic box from when I was in college of negatives, and that's what I had left.
And were they in plastic, so they managed to live?
Yeah, the whole binder was plastic and it was like a box. So
Wow. That's good.
yeah, so I understand. Let's see, I think that's the last of the chat questions. This is the part of the presentation where we invite people to unmute and ask questions in person. How are we doing for time, Ben?
I think we're doing great for time, and we have a few minutes left. If anyone wants to exchange pleasantries or ask any follow-up questions, I think this would be a great time. John had asked a question, but it went straight to me only. He was curious, how did you get this collection in the first place? What was the story?
Well, a friend of mine from UMass emailed me, a friend of mine that I worked with years ago. She emailed me and said she knew of somebody who had these glass plate negatives and he was moving and he had no place to take them and he really didn't want to throw them away. Would I be interested? And I was like, no, I don't want somebody else's stuff. And I'm like, I really didn't. And then as I started thinking about what could be on them, I said, I think I will take these. So that's kind of how it went down. I was very fortunate to have them offered to me, but I'm so glad that I made the right choice to pick them up because I don't know what would have happened to him. He didn't want to dispose of them, but it may very well have ended up happening because he had no place to go with them. So, or no place that he could store them.
Right. I saw
Clint. Did you receive funding for this?
The only funding that I've received is I did a crowd fund with a GoFundMe, and I got enough money to cover all of the archival materials that I'm using and a little extra, which was really helpful for me to upgrade my scanner.
I saw Clint had a question.
We're lucky up here in the Toronto area in Canada. We have an outfit called the Canadian Heritage Photography Foundation. They exist purely on grants, essentially to scan and digitize the works of photographers. And they're doing great because they have an executive director who is just going gangbusters, and we're kind of lucky, I gotta admit. Now, I have a very similar situation. I come across glass negatives every now and then, just 30 feet away from me at the bottom of the stairs. I have a large plastic bin of 8x10 glass negatives. Yeah. They're of the construction or rebuilding of the Niagara hydroelectric station. And one of these days I will figure out who the photographer was because they're really good.
Right.
Any bozo couldn't just come along. This was 8x10 done in the field, as are yours. Those negs are fantastic. Clearly that photographer was very talented. Great composition. Technically the negatives are finished beautifully. They're not, the emulsion isn't falling off. They're finished brilliantly. So they knew what they were doing. So maybe one day you'll find out.
I agree with you on that, because that was the first thing that went through my mind. Is as soon as I started looking at these, I started thinking, I'm in my head curating an exhibit with them. I'm like, wow, I see this whole show. But there's definitely multiple photographers in this collection, because I can see by, I know which ones are done by a professional, and I can tell that it's the same professional because I now know how they compose. And So that's one thing, but it would be fantastic. And I think over time, I can't do this part of it myself. I can't do the whole thing myself. So at some point when I get this going, to the point where I can include other people, I'm going to start reaching out for help with the historical aspect of who this could be, where might some of these have been taken, and who are these people, and are their relatives? It's just interesting stuff, but it is a lot for one person.
So, but you addressed a very key thing. You've recognized the compositional style of this photography.
Absolutely.
So you've probably got a tip of the iceberg, and there's probably more out there. Hopefully they haven't been destroyed.
Oh yeah.
And somebody will say, "Hey Terry, I saw your negs. Composition seems kind of the same," or the locale is the same, or, "Oh, by the way, I recognize some of the people."
Right. That would be great.
I'm going to tell you a really bizarre story. I got a call not that long ago. A colleague who's in the photography sort of equipment area, he called me up. He does a lot of recycling and metal stuff, and somebody called him about these metal boxes, and they turned out to be full of really beautiful black and white 8x10s and 5x7s from the 50s and 60s, very recognizable stuff of Toronto. And it was a very good photographer, and I know that that particular photographer traded photos with other photographers here in Toronto, and that studio sort of closed down. So they very unwisely disposed of a lot of stuff. Now this particular photographer, he in turn, back in the 50s, was walking along some street in downtown Toronto and came across a bin, and somebody had thrown out a bunch of glass negatives done by this photographer named Arthur Goss, very famous. He did a lot of stuff early in Toronto. So he salvaged those and made some prints, and included in this whack of about 700, maybe 800 photographs were some of the prints that he had made from the glass negatives that he had found.
Wow.
And so I got those, and I got his stuff, and it's just so weird. I look at these and I go,
It's exciting. I have a couple of folks in the area who have passed their they have collections of negatives from someone who was a photographer in their family, and I was able to have this family sign me over the copyrights and everything to this one photographer who used to be our local newspaper photographer back in the 40s and 50s, and that they didn't keep those negatives at the newspaper. They went home with the photographer, so they belonged to him, the copyrights and everything. And so the family signed him over to me, and I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, I'm looking at photographs in the 50s of like Peggy Parker store, Aunt August. He specialized in photographing these amazing window displays, and I just love what I'm finding. And then another family recently reached out to me and passed over some other negatives as well, but I'm more excited about the ones that are from the area where I live, because I know the area so well. I certainly can't accept stuff like this from everybody, because I do get a lot of people asking, do you want to take these? And there are some things I will take, and there are some things that I just can't, because I have no place to put them. I mean, as it is now, I have my stuff on wire racks. I have dehumidifiers going. I have, I'm trying to keep temperature control. Everything is off the floor, just to make sure y'all know that. In these beautiful, this is what I'm using. I have these nice archival boxes. Everything is numbered, and they're stacked on metal shelves. I mean, I'm doing everything I can to make this, make sure that this lives on. And I will eventually have to find a place where they will live, because I can't do it justice by hanging on to it for the rest of my life. As much as I love them, it's not something I can do. It's
start looking now.
I haven't.
Joe has a question. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. I wanted to say, I wish I had known you about 20 years ago because I had an interesting experience with lantern slides. I bought a lot at an auction, about 20 or 25, that were missing the glass cover, were damaged, and some were very peculiar because the content of some of the lantern slides were other photographs. Somebody took photographs of photographs mounted on an old wooden bulletin board that was out of doors, and the rest were Western scenes. And I knew enough about some of the early Chicago. I live in Chicago. There were several World War I period movie studios in Chicago, and these looked like they may be from them.
Wow.
I was an amateur at cleaning them up. I found some glass slides, and then I read someplace in a manual that you needed to put a mask between the two pieces of glass to leave some air there when you remounted them.
Mm-hmm.
Put the right kind of tape around them, Mylar tape that would take the heat from a projector. I ended up giving them to a movie museum in Fremont, California, and it turned out this fellow who was the curator there could identify some of the people who from his knowledge of Chicago actors from that period. So I donated them from him and assessed a sort of generous tax deduction for the purpose. So that was my experience, but I didn't use distilled water to clean them, but I cleaned the glasses, and then but I didn't touch the emulsion part at all. I knew that some of them were damaged.
Right.
Some were seriously damaged, some were lesser damaged, but I knew that if you touched them, you could make things even worse.
Yeah,
so I mailed them off. So I mailed them off to him. He told me how to pack them. They all arrived. Shipping glass is not always such the easiest thing to do. They all arrived in one piece. There were about 25 of them. So, so the only thing I have left, I do have a kind of a 8x10 blow-ups of the pictures, but I don't have. I saw all the original glass I sent off, but I wasn't really archivally, for preserving them ideally the way they should, but I left them in better shape than they started out with.
Well, that's good.
Terry, can you talk a little bit about the training that you got? Like, how did you decide where you were going to take classes or get certifications?
Well, I actually don't have a certification. I don't have any certifications. I have an MFA. I spent a lot of time working with film. So when you work with film, you understand negatives, positives, you understand. Clearly, I understood how to take care of them, but I certainly didn't pay attention to how to take care of them. My hackles are up when it comes to anything that has to do with film or photographs. It will be that way for the rest of my life. When I see how somebody has something stored, I cringe and I can't just do anything about it.
What was the NEDCC workshop?
That was a great workshop. It was a 6-week workshop that I took, and they took us through. It was great because I already knew a lot of what they were doing, but there were some things I didn't know. They were working with, they taught you how to work with preserve paper, preserve. Trying to think what the other. They did film, they did glass plates, they did tintype, they did daguerreotype. I mean, they went through the whole thing. And I will say that it was a really, really good workshop that I did with them. It was like I think it was like every week for 6 weeks or something like that. I don't remember how it went, but I did that. And then I did some, the Eastman House, the Eastman Museum, they have a lot of stuff online, but they also will periodically have a workshop, and it's really worth taking one of those online. They're all virtual. Everything I've done has been virtual because I did most of it during COVID. That's when I was home, and that's when I was going to work on this, and that's when I started the project. It was a great way to stay productive, and also, I got to do the training with them. And like I said, I did the training with them, but there was a lot of things I did know that I had learned after my own situation had happened, because I did a lot of reading, a lot of research after on, is there any way I can save this negative? And, you know, I just dove into it. So I'm actually, you know, I'm a documentary photographer, and I work with alternative processes. And I've always considered myself a photographer or an artist. And now I do add preservationist because I really believe in preserving every single thing I make and everything I see out there that somebody has, you know, that's going to hold value. It's really important to learn how to preserve it, even if it's not a photograph. It could be an old camera. It could be, you know, somebody's mask from the war. It could be a whole bunch of stuff sitting in a historical society. And I never knew the value of preserving something. I thought, oh, just put it in a case somewhere. But if you don't have the right case, you're going to have chemicals that are going to be, you know, affecting like the glass plates. You have to have archival, you know, cardboard, because you want to protect, you know, from the gases that come from some of those. And, you know, it's important. It's just really important to preserve. I'm not, oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, you know, I'm not I get people a lot of times will ask me, oh, can you fix this? You know, the emulsion came off this glass plate that I had. And that's a conservationist's job. I don't do conservation work, and I mean, that's another whole world of its own. And there are some things I can do, but I don't like to take anything like that, because it's so critical that you have the right person doing the work. And if somebody's not trained and they don't use the right product, they could be putting a gas into it, and from, you know, or from a chemical that is going to prevent an emulsion from adhering, or if they use the wrong adhesive, or, you know, there's so many things that can go wrong. So a conservationist, I know that most of you probably know this, but that's a completely different game. And those people, I mean, I don't know how they do it, but they have knowledge that I just don't have. It's amazing to watch them work in their environment with something meticulous, like a painting, you know, from 200 years ago or something. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes.
I know that nedcc.org, they do have some preservation leaflets
Right.
on the website, so that you can look at some of those. There's a couple more questions. Oh, Ron just says that the 2014 Daguerrean Annual has a wonderful article about daguerreotypes saved from the dump by Susan Abele. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
I'll have to check that out.
Let's see.
Susan Abele.
Thank you. Sure.
Just one point. We're working with older computers. We have Windows XP and Windows 7. And we just discovered that backup drives, you should try to buy a backup drive. There are no such thing as a backup drive for Windows XP. The latest is Windows 7. So it's something to keep in mind, that as time goes on, your backup drives will not work with your older computers.
Correct.
And the older backup drives will not work with your newer computers. So just keep that in mind if you're backing anything up, not on the internet, but that's just come up.
It's very good information, and that's why looking to the cloud or looking for a server, and they'll have to keep updating too. This isn't going to stop now. I mean, TIFF, you know, a TIFF file is great right now, and it might be good for another 10 years. It could be good for another 50 years. We don't know. But because it's an archival standard right now, I'm thinking that when they do make that change, it will be able to accept these TIFFs, because that's what they're putting out there for information for archiving. Now, as far as having a computer where you can't do a backup, I mean, they change those connections constantly. You know, I remember back when FireWire was the big one. I had FireWire connections, and you know, I remember zip drives. We had them. Do you remember the zip drives and the SCSI connectors and all these different connections? They do change over time. And that's why it's important to find a place outside of just your hard drive backups that are going to be able to sustain during the change.
Yes, and even if the connections work, they don't read them, because we've found that even if they have USB connections, they do not work.
Correct.
As soon as they get too big, they don't work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's why, again, once again, that finding a place where I can get these, you know, on a server in a safe place will be the best. Yep.
If I could just make a comment, Terry, if you get any, I'm sure your name is out there all over the place with your expertise with glass negatives, and you mentioned that you're pretty much full to capacity now. If you or anybody else, though, has a chance to save some glass negatives, can't handle them yourself, let PHSNE know.
I will.
We have an annual show, and we could sell them there, or at least make them available to people who hold on to them before they get to the trash.
Right. No, that's a good point. I do accept most glass plates still from people because I like to take a look and see what's there. And I guess that's the part that I can, you know, that I really liked, I appreciate about my my experience and my education in understanding, you know, the composition of what I'm looking at. That's where the, you know, the artistic side of me comes in and says, you know, this is where I know that I can put an exhibit together because I understand how to make an image and how to, you know, compose an image. And so I like to look at what's coming through to see if there's something that might go into the show. And then, yes, it's good to know that PHSNE's out there because I would definitely, you know, give you folks a call. There's a couple other places as well that, you know, have reached out. So I definitely will keep that in mind.
I just wanted to mention that I think Ben has pasted back in the links that were at the top of the chat for Terry's links for Instagram, and somebody photographed this and a few others. So
yeah, the Facebook one, somebody photographed this on Facebook. I mean, it like went up to like 5,000 people in a very short time. And I was really shocked. I haven't been putting things on as often as I used to because, you know, I have other responsibilities, but you know, I'm dedicating, I've got some time coming up that I'm like, I'm going to dedicate, I'm going to start working on this again because I can't do it. I have to do it in my free time. I can't just do it all the time. I guess as long as COVID's here, I have a lot of free time though.
How are we doing for time, Ben?
Good. I think this would be a perfect time to give Terry one more round of applause because that was fantastic. So thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for having me. If anyone has any questions, you know, my email's there. You're welcome to, oh, maybe it's not there. It's phototc, PHOTOTC at Comcast.net. And you can also find my email on my website.
Thanks. Thank you. It was so great to have you. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dana, you might want to mention next month's.
Yes, I was about to.
Really, it's a different aspect of something that Terry's involved with, and for those people that don't necessarily want to conserve a lot of what they have, but have old images that they really want to treasure and do something with. Digital silver imaging is the 21st century leader in this, I think, in the country. So
very good.
Should pass the word that these Zoom meetings, like Terry's, are really good, and we should get a lot more people to look at them.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I was going to mention before we close the meeting that next month, which I believe is the 6th, also March 6th, we're going to have Eric Luden of Digital Silver Imaging present for us on his company. And in April, we're having no Zoom meeting because hopefully, COVID permitting, we're having Photographica again. And it is scheduled for Saturday, April 23rd, 2022 at Newton North High School in Newtonville, Mass. And the details will be at phsne.org. So that's our trade show where, you know, members gather and dealers sell their images and cameras and other equipment. And there's the famous, I don't know if John is signed on, but dollar tables, which is.
Yeah, we're working on that right now. The show, John Dockery is the show manager, and he's taking table reservations. And for those people that have done Photographica before, these are 12-foot tables, not 8-foot, 12-foot tables. So if you've got a whole bunch of stuff you want to move, this is probably the best location we have ever had. And COVID permitting, it's going to be an incredible show.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, looking forward to that. It'll be great to see everyone again. So I think that's about it for our questions.
I wanted to say one more thing, Dana. I think somebody in your organization, somebody at PHSNE sent out a really good promotional blast for this. That's how I found out about it here in Toronto. I kind of watch your stuff every now and then. We do a similar program third Wednesday of every month. But thank you to whoever sent this. I spread the word, and I recognize a few names here of people that, you know, come to our stuff and are watching yours. So thank you, whoever had that brilliant stroke of genius. Thank you for the invite. That's why I'm here, and I'll be back.
Oh, that's great.
I love your shows.
And join PHSNE.
Yeah, seriously, we have members from all over the place, so you don't have to be in New England by any means.
Hey, we got people all over the world. I know exactly what you mean. So
well, thank you for coming. It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you. Look forward to meeting you in person.
Well,
Thank you, Glenn.
yeah, and as far as Photographica goes, just keep your eye on the website. You know, we're hoping that
I've been to that show. I've had tables at that show. It's a great show. It's the second best show in the world. You know.
After Toronto.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been really great to see everyone. And Terri, again, thank you. It's a great project, and I loved seeing your images from South Africa. And I hope that, you know, you will all visit her website and see more of her work.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I love that, Clint. That's awesome.
It's right beside my tower here all the time.
Feel free to shoot me an email. Okay,
All right.
thank you very
It was
much.
good to see everyone.
It's a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Okay,
All
bye.
right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Everyone.
Take
Thanks,
care. Stay
Ben.
warm. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye,
Thanks, guys.
John.
Bye. Good night.